your debate now.
Okay, thank you for the time. Let me introduce myself. My name is Vidi Ananda. As a Prime Minister from 4D class, I'm totally agree with this motion, which states that sex orientation is determined at birth, where science and psychology can show it. And most people eventually see that this, for mysterious reason, is the way they are made. It is something that almost every leading psychologist and biologist holds on to. And the LGBT people I talk to always feel that way. Did you were born? Did you choose your sex when you were born? Of course not. Sexuality and gender identity are not choices any more than being left-handed or having brown eyes or having heterosexual. Part of that is accepting yourself and accepting this is how God creates you. A Swedish study published in the journal Proceedings of the National Academy of Science states that the brains of homosexual people are the same as those of heterosexual people of the opposite sex. These results are evidence that sexual orientation, including being gay and lesbian, has been determined since in the womb. The study compared the size of part of the brain in 90 adults. Gay men and heterosexual women were found to have brain parts that are the same size. Meanwhile, the right side of the brain in lesbian women and heterosexual men were both larger. There is other evidence that during fetal development, exposure to certain hormones also plays a role. In addition, genetic and hormonal factor generally interact with undermined environment factor. Although wrong, parenting or exposure to gay individual does not cause homosexuality. The dominant opinion in the scientific community is that there is a strong biological component to sexual orientation and that genetic, hormonal, and environmental factors interact to influence a person's orientation. There is no scientific evidence that either homosexuality or heterosexuality is a free will choice. That's all from me. Thank you.
All right. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for the opportunity. We are from the opposition team that against this motion. We strongly disagree that sexual orientation is determined at birth. Well, continue to our team split. I am Laputu Ekaryani as a opposition leader in opening opposition team and Niputu Muci Aryani as a deputy opposition in opening opposition team. I have one point that I have want to rebut the government team. First, you said that sexual orientation can be seen or determined at birth, but I have not seen a convincing argument from the arguments you mentioned earlier. Has the research been proven by the presence of certain clear samples, and how can a midwife and the other health workers who assist in the birth process say or decide that the baby has a problem with his or her sex orientation with the clear evidence? Recent research has shown that there is no such thing as a homosexual gen. Sexual orientation is not related to gens. Many ex-gays will tell you that is one point in their lives they thought they were born gay. But the reality is that there is no scientific evidence that establishes a genetic cause for homosexuality or finds a gay gen. There is no DNA as well or medical test to determine if a person is homosexual. So, sexual orientation is a matter of self affirmation and public expression. Next, ladies and gentlemen, I would like to give my arguments. I have 2 points in here. First, sex orientation cannot be determined at birth because those feelings will be felt when someone is growing up, and those feelings arise based on the environmental adaptation of the sex orientation actor when they understand and choose to live like that. Because For example, a lot of people who go to jail and go straight to jail, and when they came out, they are gay. So, did something happen while they were there? Can that person still be called with to be gay at at birth, even though before going to jail, he was a normal human being? And then second, there are studies that say that psychological trauma in childhood can affect a person's sexual orientation, including homosexual. And the research states that people who have a same sexual orientation have experienced sexual harassment in their childhood. I must be quite blunt here. The idea that people are born gay is the big lie on the entire homosexual movement. Science has not yet to prove that there is a gay gen or that people are born gay. Research conducted by team led by Dr. Niklas Langstrom from the Karolinska Institute said environmental factors had an influence of up to 64%. Then, according to Sets and his colleagues in a study between 75% and 92% of homosexual behavior does not depend on genetic component. So, offenders who experience sex orientation problems are suffering from development problems, which often begin in childhood as gender confusion, family dysfunction, or abuse that can be felt by them when they grow up. So that's why I strongly disagree that sexual orientation is determined at birth. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. That enough for my arguments. It will be continued by the second speaker later.
Okay, thank you. Good evening. I'm Ayursma from class 4D as Deputy Prime Minister. I completely agree with the motion tonight, which states that sexual orientation is determined from birth. Yeah, no one can choose what the gender, and sexual attraction is not created from birth. So we meet many people with their own sexual interests. It's not even common anymore if there are people who like the same sex because there are so many people who have same-sex sexual interests and are even known to exist. LGBTQ or same-sex community, gay for fellow men and lesbian for fellow women. Therefore, that person not shy or hiding from the public that he is someone who likes the same sex. Even in fact, Thailand they make a film where the main character is a man who has a sexual attraction to the same sex or gay. And recently, there has also been a gay marriage in Thailand. So that sexual orientation is determined from birth. So whoever the person is interested in this, the type of sexual attraction that person is. As far as I know, there is no further argument. If you are a gay, you are born gay, said University of London scientist Kazi Rahman. Homosexual of the two sexes have difference in certain cognitive abilities. This suggests possible difference in the structure of their brains. This is the first result of a brain scanner trying to find the source of the difference. When the results are called lesbian and heterosexual, men have symmetrical section. Meanwhile, heterosexual women and gay men had no difference in brain size. So that's all from me. Thank you.
Alright, good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I'm Niputumuchi Aryani. As the second speaker in Deputy Opposition Leader team, I have one point that I want to rebut the government team. Actually, I don't agree with your argument. I think it's actually wrong. Research suggests that there is no scientific term for a gay gene. A person's sexual orientation cannot be predicted through one type of gene, influenced by many genetic and environment factors. There are about 2 until 10% of people who have same sex exclusively or in addition sex with other sex, the researcher said. The survey results show that there are hundreds of genes that have an influence on sexuality. However, even though these genetic factors are combined, genetic factors only comprise 8 until 25%. Consider quite small as a contributor of same-sex sexual orientation. However, Professor Greg Nelly from the University of Sydney said that this study has a weakness. The main weakness is that this study is based on data from people aged 40 to 60 years old in the UK. Those younger sex offenders are underrepresented. Even so, in this study, it reminds that genes cannot be used as a benchmark to predict whether someone will be gay or not. Next, ladies and gentlemen, I will deliver my argument that a sexual orientation can be determined due to social culture factor, because based on Clark 2001 state that children who grow and develop under the care of a homosexual family will have a greater tendency to become homosexual as well. In Clark's 2001 assumption, this happened because of the impact of childhood experience raised by homosexual parents, and also a result of the social culture that is a place for children to develop. Furthermore, Clark explained that children who grow and develop under the care of homosexual families will lack and lose appropriate and correct model for forming sexual identity, so that these children will experience confusion in finding and determine how sexual orientation and behavior will be grow and develop properly. This view is also supported by Kaufman, which states that social culture conditions have become a place that binds and influences individually. So that's why we are strongly disagree with the motion that sexual orientation is determined at birth. Okay, all right, ladies and gentlemen, that's my argument. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. My name is Nikama Sidiani. I'm a member of the government. So I'm strongly agree with these motions. From James Martin, Jesuit priest and the consultor for the uh, Vatican Secretariat for Communication in July 10th, 2017, National Catholic Register interview, Father J. Martin explained his visions regarding LGBT Catholics, available at ncregister.com. When asked, "Are you suggesting by this that God made LGBT people the way they are?" So, science and psychology show that, and most people are finally coming to see that this, for mysterious reasons, is the way they are made. That's something that held by almost every reputable psychology, psychologist and biologist, and the LGBT people I speak to have always felt that way. Part of this accepting oneself and accepting this is the way God made you. And next, Anthony Booger, PhD, Associate Professor at Brock University, wrote the following information in a May 17, 2006 article titled Biological versus Non-Biological Older Brothers and Men's Sexual Orientation, published by PNAS, or Proceedings of the National Academy of Science of the United States of America. I demonstrate that the number of biological older brother, including those not reared with the participant, but not the number of biological older brothers, increase the probability of homosexual in men. This result provides evidence that a prenatal mechanisms and not social and or rearing factor affects men's sexual orientation development. That's for me. Thank you.
Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Now I'm Dani Eka. As the closing opposite will refuse the opposition side. I have some point. The first, sex orientation is more likely to be caused by environment influence, where a person who is a drop not support by norms and society strong religious value can fall due to the talks or deviant some sick person. So what can ban sexual orientation? In the case of teenager, it's generally because of a broken heart and a broken household. When a loved one leaves him, it makes the child sing, like ways children who are lonely because their parents are busy. When there is someone of the same gender who can replace the loneliness that can make him interest because the person really understands the need, desires, weakness, including sensitive point that can arouse a person's sex drive. Children who are anxious can become addicted. It can also be by the traumatic experience of the woman with a cruel man, so that applies to every man. Then he prefer to have sex with a woman. So the intersexual relationship man and woman are mainly stimulated by agonistic supernatural factor. Many the reality is established a or medical test to it is a matter of self-affirmation. So that's my argument. Thank you.
Hello, ladies and gentlemen. I'm Unita. I'm the government wife. From the argument, we can conclude that from the argument, I really agree with the motion that sexual orientation is determined at birth. These results are evident that a sexual orientation, including being gay and lesbian, has been determined since the womb. The dominant opinion of the scientific community is there a strong biological component to sexual orientation that genetic, hormonal, and environmental factors interact to influence a person's orientation. Yes, a person can choose that a gender and sexual attraction there because has been created since birth. So, we meet the lot of people of their respective sexual interest. It is not even common anymore if there are people who like the same sex because are there already many people who have a same-sex sexual interest and it's even know that they exist there before the person that not ashamed or hide from the public that he's someone who likes the same sex. Even in Thailand, they make a film where the main actor is a man who has a sexual attraction to same sex beside that recently that guy wedding in Thailand. So that sexual orientation has been determined since birth. So whatever the person interested with in the type of sexual attraction of the person, we strongly agree that sexual orientation is determined at birth. Okay, that's all my argue. Thank you.
Okay, good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I am from closing opposition. Extremely disagree if sexual orientation is determined at the birth. Before I tell my argument, let me introduce myself. My name is Bagus Teguh. So, from the first lesson, that's my team said, I can conclude that no one says sexual orientation is determined at the birth. What you treat sexual orientation exactly like a race under the federal civil rights law. But it is true if the sexual orientation is determined in the birth. The biological purpose of the sex reproduction and natural sex reproduction only occurs in the opposite sex relation. So, in the one sense, everyone who is born with a normal reproduction system is a psychological oriented. toward heterosexuality at the birth. And the reason that gender orientation is determined at the birth is absurd because sexual orientation involves a mix of sexual attraction, behavior, and self-identification. Surveys about the sexual have shown that these are three elements of the sexual orientation. They are not always consistent with each other and not always stable over time. For example, I have a friend from the childhood used to hang out with a woman, and until now he behaves like a woman and has an interest in a man. So, with this case example, it can be concluded that sexual orientation can change depending on the habit and the individual carries out, not determined from the birth. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, that's my argument. Thank you.